CHRO Panel Discussion on Workforce Transformation with a skills-first approach, talent acquisition and talent management based on iMocha EY Skills-First Transformation Report. I hand over the session to the moderator, Mr. Sujit Karpe.
Welcome to all the panelists. So let's start with ladies first. In the superheroes, there were no superwomen, so let's start with ladies first. So, Gargy, have you seen what are the benefits of skill-first transformation, talent acquisition, especially in the sector where you operate? So, have you seen a trend going around skill first in the healthcare, in Middle East, around the world? Are you following that? And do you plan to implement that in Aster?
See, any organization that's believing in skill first, the only benefit that they're looking at is an agile workforce that can give you the best customer service, whether it is internal, whether it is external. And healthcare on its own is forced to be at the top of the game because you have your doctors, nurses, your frontliners who are definitely engaged in enhancing their skills. They have to be updated with the evolving medical practices. The technology advancements are way faster and way higher with them, and they have to provide the healthcare, save lives. So it's very important that they do that. The regulators promote it too. So healthcare regulators across the globe, they have mandatory skill enhancement courses. So it's quite interesting that, the healthcare people, they're forced to do that in the frontline side. What we also do is on the back end, like if you look inward into the organization, like people like us who are healthcare professionals supporting the frontliners, there's a lot that we do in implementation of best practices, implementation of various skill first program has been there with us for a long time. If we remove the functional aspect of it and take care of the leadership competencies, we've been doing that for a very long time. So in healthcare, your functional aspect is definitely there, but in leadership aspect also has been a key important aspect that we've been following.
So I always thought healthcare or pharma would be the last to adopt skill first because it is like very, the industry is very regulated.
Yeah.
And you don't want your doctor, you're going to change with the skill first, right?
We hire for that, Sujit. What happens is today when you hire a derma doctor, for example, you'll ask the derma doctor, are you licensed in aesthetics? Can you do fillers, Botox? Can you do this? It's just not medical. So you are asking a doctor that have you done the certifications? There's no more the monopoly that, I'm a doctor, I'm going to get a job in the GCC. It's quite easy.
And that's the thing, I was wrong. So in the recent 3 to 4 months, I've spoken to a large pharmaceutical company in US, one in UK, one in Europe, like in Switzerland, one in India, and one in Southeast Asia. And all 5 have approached us. Like in the afternoon, I was on a call with large pharma company, and the business requirement was very simple. We were doing succession planning, and to do our succession planning, we have decided to implement skills intelligence, how iMocha can help us. Very simple, right? Till date, they were saying in our succession planning, we have not been doing skill first approach, and we want to implement that starting next year. Right, so 5 pharma companies approaching us. We were shocked, right? What is happening? So that's pretty interesting to hear.
Yeah.
Next question to Dr. Ramki. What according to you have been the key initiative for a skill first transformation? When I say a key initiative, is it around, we saw a good image at the end, the 2.0 by Gavin, right? It is taxonomy, ontology, talent acquisition, L&D, succession planning. So what according to you is a driver? Who in the HR team comes with this? Everybody has a thought process, right? But who in the HR do you think is driving it initially, want to implement it first? The talent acquisition team, the L&D team, the succession planning team? Who thinks that it's the biggest solution to some of the problem they are having?
Yeah, let me just digress a bit. I'll come back to the question. listening to Kunal in the keynote address, one thought that struck me was, do we have skills inventory within HR? Do we assess our HR professionals using skills first approach? So, I mean, if charity has to begin at home, probably I think HR professionals should start this skills first approach in HR so that we can inspire the rest of the organization to adopt the approach. And more so, I think it's the right time to do it. I mean, so much is changing within HR. It's not the same thing that we've been through in the past. With technology being a main enabler, the skills are transforming, and I think it's right time for HR leaders to really take stock of those skills and say, do we have the right set of HR talent to deliver, service and value to the organization? So coming back to this question, I was very attracted to that diagram of integrating technologies that Gavin has shown. My question really is, competency mapping, competency architecture has been around for last, I think, 15, 20 years, wherein, organizations have done a good job of integrating competencies into all the HR processes, be it acquisition, development, performance, succession, career mobility, all that stuff. Now, the question is, have we done that for skills? And I'm making a slight distinction between competencies and skills here. What I mean by skills is technical and professional skills. I doubt it. I haven't come across organizations that have taken skills as seriously as competencies. Behavioral competencies have been around, and I think we've done a great job. But again, I feel that time is ripe for us to actually say, let's get hold of technical professional skills and create an architecture. Now, before we get into systems architecture and technology architecture, I believe HR leaders must first look at, do we have a conceptual process architecture around skills? Because you can get all the best technologies in the world, but if you don't have a process and a conceptual framework, how the hell are you going to get value out of that? So I think, and just as we did with competencies, I believe time is ripe for HR leaders to create a conceptual process architecture around skills first approach, and then use all the wonderful technologies we have to integrate them into it so that the data can move and we get analytics and reports for decision making on people. So I think the priority for me is creating that architecture.
Creating the job architecture, which is more skills first.
Yeah, it's the talent process architecture. So you have the acquisition and development, all that stuff. So how do we integrate skills into these processes? Because if you don't do it conceptually, we will have challenges, trying to use technologies, straight away. I'm not a HR tech guy. I'm a HR tech user. And I really believe that technology is an enabler. It's not a driver. And in HR especially, I think we need to have a philosophy. We need to have a framework that we believe in passionately before we actually say, yes, let's get the technology to make it work for us.
Thank you.
Sorry if I may add out of turn, because Ramki had raised an important point which seemed to have touched a raw nerve. I think the skills part, like the question that you had, whether it should be talent or it should be development with L&D, which should handle it first. Fundamental question, I think that Ramki has also raised, is that from an HR point of view, when we look at our own skill set within HR and our ability to assess and then to lead the skills transformation, I think, it's quite, I speak as a CHRO, as an HR leader, and I'm sure it would resonate with a lot of them. I think we have a lot of weakness at the moment there itself. And, then to start the skill set required within HR to lead the skills transformation, and especially when it comes to the technical skills and the integration of the HR tech that's getting added into the organization's body. So I think that's the first starting point for HR to start working on, and then move towards talent and L&D to be able to lead the skills first transformation across the organization. I mean, that's my personal take on it.
So, very good point. And like a couple of months ago, we got a similar requirement from Coca-Cola, right? And that requirement was for doing a skill first transformation for the HR team. Maybe somebody over there had this thought before transforming the organization, let's first transform the HR team with the skill first. So they came to us saying that, can you help us with the right taxonomy, ontology, or the entire new skills which our HR team should adopt, and how that change is going to happen, right? So
see, it's not very surprising. I mean, I know that we're sort of moving away slightly from the topic here, but it's not very surprising. And I go back to the point that Gavin made about this region specifically. This region is not known to be heavily invested in HR. This region is not known to be heavily invested in HR tech. So we are just coming up the curve, trying to fill up a big lag, first developing the HR architecture within the organization. As it says, if you look at the HR architecture or the HR organization setup itself within the organization, that is probably weaker in comparison to the other organization. For example, if you take an IT architecture from an organization design point of view, I'm purely talking about it. You look at sales or finance. Or finance is obviously a huge, enviable, step cousin for me, because in any organization where I've been. So if you look at those kind of departments, traditionally this region has given a lot of spotlight onto those regions. So obviously they have taken the most of the investment. So we are first trying to cover up a lag of the architecture. Then we are trying to, in addition to trying to suddenly cover up the lag of the technology part. So, that's the challenge that we are facing. And I was just, joking, it's a painful reality, not only a joke. Earlier as HR, we would get bashed up for lack of benefits or something like that. It has been quite a thankless job. Thankfully, it's getting better, but it has been in this region quite a thankless kind of a function. So earlier you would get bashed up for a lot of absence of a lot of framework or whatever it is. Today you get bashed up in addition to the lack of technical skills as well. So the job is getting, the HR maturity is coming up, but the thanklessness is not reducing at the same rate.
Thank you. Just one other thing, because you asked the question, which unit within the HR would be the guys that should be driving this first, right? L&D, recruitment, etc. To the point that you were just saying, I think if HR is driving this, they've missed, the organization has missed the logic. If you look at why IT and finance have been so good, it's people at leadership level have seen the step change impact it can have to the organization and have then forced IT, the CIO going, what are you doing about X, Y, Z, and created the agenda. I think if it's HR trying to do it by themselves, without that C-suite, if you look at the business as usual, that lack of leadership buy-in has been the biggest challenge. So I really think it's about educating what kind of transformational benefit to the organization it is, and then almost to the opposite of having HR be mandated to do it.
Sujit, I'll also add, because it's such a touchy topic that everybody said, but there's a different spin to it that I would say. And you really pointed out that the HR guys should be trained first. So every year there's a transformation, something or the other is catching up. We have to run and catch up to that. And very unique to healthcare, very unique to this region, we started with the HR skill transformation first. So our team was first given the training on how to handle tech. We had 2 failed ERP implementations. No sorry about it, but we naturally let it sink, gradually experimented around it. And then we realized that actually what is as is in 2B, we don't even know what is as an HR. So we have to figure out what it is, learn what we are going to do, and then implement it. We delayed it by a year or 2, but we have a proper HR induction. Many of us, we land in HR, the next day we're inducting our new employees. Who has given us induction? Do we know about it? So we have a proper HR induction, technical skills training for HR. If I'm a performance person, I need to know what engagement survey is happening. What is my comp, benefits? Do I even understand compa ratio as a word? So all those things that we had learned sometime back in school, how do we make it relevant today? So just as a fresh breath of air, I would say that we did that first, definitely. And healthcare is not known to be very advanced in terms of the admin side. So there's a lot of work that went in the last couple of years to bring it to that speed. So we agree to Ramke what you were mentioning.
So as you said, there are two failures, right? So failure is not a there was a cricket match which India lost, and then somebody put a message. Failure is not opposite to success. Failure is a part of success.
Part of success.
So,
The match was, you're talking about the match which Australia won.
yes. So Imran, the next question is to you. There is a term or a keyword which is trending, right? Everybody's talking about upskilling. Everybody's talking about reskilling. Have you seen this term in your organization? And what is the underneath momentum which is driving this? Right? You go to a BFSI industry, a retail, aviation, a healthcare. Everyone is talking about upskilling, reskilling. But what it is really happening? What is that underneath challenge or the momentum which is getting built? And after talking about so much things, right? Is the organization and people really getting benefits of this upskilling, reskilling? How as an HR, if you do a lot of investment in upskilling, reskilling, how do you go and tell to a management that this worth millions of dollars invested, this is the ROI we got?
So it's I think an important area. So I will answer it in probably two parts. So first thing is, what is it that we are seeing from a momentum or a necessity point of view when it comes to upskilling? So there are two aspects to it. One is the organization's aspect, in the sense that why are we engaging into upskilling, and why are we starting with an upskilling part? Purely because not only that we need to upskill people for customer journey, but it's also the demand from the employees. So basically, any work that we do in terms of people capability development, any organization, it's not specific to my organization, has single purpose that we stay relevant in the market and we stay highly competitive in the market. And obviously to make sure that people who are capable of making that competition or making competitive sale in the market remain with us. So they remain engaged with us and they remain, working with us. Now, this is ideally, I don't think this transformation would have started had there been enough demand from the employee. So the pressure that we as an employer face now is that unless and until there is a proper program to upskill somebody and to show him a career journey, the youngsters or any employee for that matter are not really interested. So that was the first pressure point. It was not a very altruistic initiative by the organizations. It was in response to a need that was coming in, and plus from the market point of view, then we see today that even a non-technical organization or in an industry like retail, where we are not into high-tech skills, the transformation is very different. Because I give you a very simple example. Today, 5 years ago, if a customer would walk into one of our stores, the customer would ask for a shoe and says, well, I need to go for running. I'm just giving an example. We're not into that space, but I'm just giving an example. The customer would say, I need to buy a shoe. Can you help me? Today, the customer comes and says, I need to run. I need something which supports my arch. Do you have Clifton 9 Hoka shoe? And if you show him, say, sir, I've got Mac X, he says, no. Now, the challenge that is that I have to train my front line and anybody who has any point of interaction with the customers anywhere, wherever in the business, their skill set has to keep on getting upgraded. Like these skills may not be life-saving, but they're definitely pocket-saving for the business. So it's the same set. So, and these requirements keep changing. As the consumer's demand changes, the demand for these skills continuously change. So we are seeing first that as a momentum, and that's why the necessity. Now, within the new organization, are we able to match and carry out the skill transformation with the same pace with the demand is coming? Honestly speaking, no. We are trying to focus on the areas which are more customer facing first, where we see it will be because this is a huge cost, it requires a huge infrastructure, it requires a huge amount of engagement at the manager's level, not only from the HR point of view, and a constant follow-up, plus a whole ecosystem of software, plus skill support, etc. So in a limited way, we try and move forward in the areas which have the highest impact. So wherever we see that the lack of skill will affect our business, or lack of skill will affect the continuity of some roles, where there are these, as we call it, the sunrise sectors, where you're anticipate that you would leave people quickly, we go and start the upskilling programs there. Or in a very technical areas where the skill sets get redundant every 7-8 months. The rest, normal mortals, where probably we should be doing, I don't think we're doing enough, and I'm purely talking from my organization point of view. The third part of it, which you're talking about, how are we seeing the ROI part of it? Now, I think it's, as of now, again, I'm speaking specifically from my sector and organization point of view, it's very difficult to put a number yet, because we haven't been running these kind of programs for 4, 5, 10 years. But we, in certain areas, which are, again, very here and now, the customer touch point facing areas, we see an immediate kind of an ROI, we see the impact. Or rather, we see the lack of skills impact. When we do an upgrade on the skill, it's difficult to see the ROI there, but if there is a lack, that means if the people do not have that kind of skills, it's very easy to see the impact due to the lack of skills. So that's an easier measure. Are we in a place where we can put in a next multi-million-dollar program based on the current ROI and justify it and sell it? I don't think we are ready, because there's a lot of work that's going on in that area. As I says, it's not a pan organization, the skills upgrade yet, which is definitely needed.
I like the point what you said is the impact is not when somebody's upskilled, but if there's a lack of skill, then there's a big business impact.
Yeah, exactly.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think when it comes to upskilling, reskilling, skills first, for me, I think the most important entity or the person behind this approach is the employee himself. And the question is the employee really motivated to learn? I mean, we seem to be assuming that every employee is motivated to learn. Is that so? I think it's a question for HR leaders to really ask, is everybody motivated to learn? Or do we have varying degrees of motivation to learn? And the question is, there's this wonderful book by Dan Pink that came in 2012, bestseller, called Drive. And he actually says that the 3 motivators for professionals and leaders are purpose, freedom to think and act, and the third one he calls it mastery. So the question is, can mastery be the motivator for people to learn new things and grow their skill sets? And I think that point is relevant here in this discussion. And I think, and again, in the traditional HR parlance, we talk about line of sight between efforts and performance and reward. And we all use that. Now, the question is, can we use that framework for skills development to skills-based performance and skills-based reward and recognition? Conceptually, it looks very simple. I'm sure in practice, it's not as simple. But it's a challenge for HR leaders to create that, because that is something that can motivate people to say, yes, if I start delivering, it reflects in my performance and it would reflect in my reward and recognition. And again, just to draw a parallel, all organizations have some kind of career paths to show people that, you do this and you get promoted and you grow your career. Now, how would that translate into this new era of, digitization and technology, where it's not so much about changing jobs to grow your career, but it's about growing your mastery to grow yourself? That's a huge shift for me, shift in mindset about what does success look like, for a professional. So can we create levels of mastery in different domains. And I'm sure the skills taxology and ontology would definitely address that question, so that it provides a vision for an individual. It's not about picking up one skill now that's relevant for me in my job, but it's about saying this is the set of skills that I need to aim for in my career over a long haul, maybe 10 years. I don't know what the time frame is for technical skills, but is that possible? And maybe that needs to be more dynamic than static, because technology is changing so rapidly. So the mastery of technical skills would change, and people need to be in sync with it to realize that if I don't keep increasing my mastery, I'm going to become obsolete. And that can itself be a motivator to learn. So for me, I think the whole area of learner psychology, learner motivation, and creating processes and recognition reward systems around that is probably very critical for success of the skills first approach.
Thank you. Gavin, the next question is to you. Because you are from the BFSI, banking financial services domain, there's a lot of transformation happening towards digital payments, digital banking, digital lending, right? And BFSI is always the first of the industry to implement any technological innovation, let it be digital banking, core banking, internet, or now artificial intelligence. Do you see a lot of talent in BFSI getting redundant because of technology, and how upskilling and reskilling can really help in talent mobility or helping the employees to retain their jobs?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. And it's one of those areas where it's virtual, right? There is no manufacturing product that's being developed. So it is very much about the experience and the ability to be able to serve customers, very similar to yourself, I guess, as the e-com bubble fundamentally changed transformation of shopping. So omni-channel becomes far more important. If I think about core banking, sure, but that was just business as usual. If you look at the speed with which banks adopted RPA and intelligent automation, they were the first major adopters that have created the industry norm. If you look at what Blue Prism or Automation Anywhere UiPath did, and tens of thousands of jobs became redundant overnight. Because it wasn't just about removing the work and the cost associated with it, there was also the speed for the customer. If you think about a credit application, credit loan, and the steps that happen and the different siloed units within a bank that need to process different parts of that application, which if you can turn on a bot, it happens almost immediately. So you get the application approved while you're on the phone, more or less. And what does that then mean in terms of your competitive landscape? So I think banking has been quite good at kind of saying, how do we change the user experience quite quickly and then work with other partners? So we were working with car dealerships here, for example, to say, how can a bank work with a car dealership so that while you're in the showroom, the bank approves your car loan while you're doing your car test drive, so that when you come back, the insurance company, the bank loan, it's all set up, sign and drive. And suddenly you make buying a car like buying a pair of shoes, right? It's, well, don't bother going to Toyota. The Ford is here and ready to go. And it becomes quite a differentiator in terms of that. And part of the challenge then, if you are going to do that, how do you create a career for banking professionals that then will fundamentally change? Because the teller role of yesterday, where it was about the process, about counting the cash, about managing fraud, is very much more now about upselling and the customer experience. If you think about how often any of us actually go into a bank branch today, it's a fundamentally different activity than what it would have been 15 years ago. So the skills at, kind of for a typical retail bank, what an actual retail bank branch now does is fundamentally different. And so then how do you reskill everything along with that? Upskilling around cross-selling and upselling products, understanding because they're only in the bank if it's a deviation to a standard process. So they have to be able to, they manage the exceptions to the rules. How do you upskill them? But also how do you keep them moving in a career path that allows them to progress to the organization? So to your point on that lateral hire, how do you take a a teller and move them through to being a credit analyst and moving them through to do something else and continuing their career is something that's fundamental. I don't think it's fixed, to be honest. I mean, the banks are brilliant at hiring and firing and really not caring along the way. So mass hiring and mass firing is very much an industry norm, rather than let's keep the people we have and continue to transform them. And if I think about somewhere like Dubai Duty Free, Colin McLaughlin constantly talks about the percentage of people that have been with the airport for 20 and 30 years, because they keep transforming them and keeping them upskilled. Very few banking employees survive that kind of tenure, I think. So I think they're probably a good example of a quick embracer to technology. Probably not the best in terms of that career journey for the average employee. Certainly people spend a lot of time at banks, and I'm sure at Emirates MBD there's a lot of people who spend a lot of time at the bank. But it is, I think, one of those areas where probably not fully end-to-end yet. And I think part of the challenge is as well, back to the point that was mentioned around performance management, the correlation between how good someone is at a particular skill, how much return on investment they bring in for the organization, and therefore the reward I give them. That equation still isn't there in any organization. I think you really can't link back, you're a 7 on the skill. If you were an 8, you would drive this much more. You've gone up to an 8, I will pay you more because I can see the business benefit to you being an 8 rather than a 7. That end-to-end isn't there today in terms of that visibility. So what you measure and reward is what you get. And if you can't measure it effectively and reward it effectively, you don't affect a change.
So one of the things is we have almost spoken to every bank from a country, let it be starting with United States, UK, France, UAE, South Africa, Singapore, India, I guess, except China and Korea and Japan, because the language is a problem, including Australia. We have spoken to almost a couple of dozens of banks who have approached us for the skill first transformation. And that was initially when we started doing, we were a little puzzled. Why all banks are coming to us, right? And we never marketed that we are a software or anything for the banking. And then we realized that there is a deep pain because the fast adoption of the technology, the employee skills are getting redundant. And if you don't reskill and upskill, because you cannot hire from the market. Because even if you hire from the market for a new skill, that person is going to get redundant after 2 years. So the only option is keep on upgrading them to the new skills.
Fully agree. I mean, but part of the challenge then is how any organization stays up to date on what those new skills are as well. Because if I think of the plethora of startups that can disrupt any part of any process today, which ones are going to make it and be sustained and part of business as usual going forward versus disappearing as a flash in the pan? It's quite difficult for an organization that has a day job, which is providing financial service products to banks or to consumers, to actually stay up to date on that as well. So that's part of the other challenge around making sure your taxonomy stays relevant so that you can start to predict what those likely changes are going to be by industry or by function.
Great. A quick rapid fire round for all of you. So let's start with you, Gargy. Would you be happy in talent acquisition? You have an application in your career, on your career farm, where rather than people applying with their resume or something, there are some skills. People just rate themselves on that skills and send an application. And you just somebody who has rated themselves better, right? With some credibility, they prove that I'm good in this, and you hire them.
Which one would I prefer?
Yeah, would you prefer this approach or the traditional approach you are having?
See, it again goes back to the context of what role am I hiring for. If it's a doctor, and if it just ticks the skills, it's actually the name and the license, and that's enough. I don't even need a CV. Right. Because I can't read the 30 pages CV that they write. I can't even understand. I need a medical personnel to read through it. But if it is somebody else where I need to know it, then probably that. So it all goes back to context again, where what role am I hiring? I'm open as a recruiter, open for both. And today you should be open to both to see. But what role are you picking will make the difference.
Great. So we are talking a lot about millennials. So Imran, if somebody applies to your organization with an Instagram profile.
Well, we do get, honestly, sometimes applications like that. Again, pretty much back to what we're saying is depends on the context. So if somebody is applying for social media roles, content creators, social media artists, I don't need to look at it anything else beyond the Instagram. And that could be a useful tool to hire or to reject, both. But if somebody is applying for HR, I think it'll be better than the Instagram part.
So how many hours of L&D or learning and development do you think an employee should invest every year?
I would not use that measure because that's an efficiency measure. So I would rather use an outcome or a results-based measure. What did this training deliver? For me, that's more important than the hours put in.
Okay.
It's an interesting question because I remember a very long time ago, I used to work in an organization, a large global organization, obviously I can't name it. And we had the mandate of 5 man days per year of training, which had to be achieved across the organization. There was no clarity whether it is 5 man day per individual employee or 5 into 5,000, so 5,000. And with that flexibility, I mean, again, now it's been a long time, so I can confess that. With that flexibility, I know that me and the other HR colleagues around the region used to play around with that.
So, which is the role you think will provide a better growth in any organization? Domain skills role, HR role, or tech role? Which has a better growth prospect?
That's a difficult one. I mean, I think it's a domain for me, yeah. Because that's something that's always required and that's what is going to deliver value to the business.
Gavin?
Yeah, I think because when I'm talking about the industrial revolutions and how many people are going to lose their job and all that kind of stuff at a lot of these conferences, for me, I don't think there is a tech role anymore. The reality is I think the winners will be people who use technology to accomplish what they need. And so those who are fearing Gen AI will be replaced by Gen AI. Those who augment their day-to-day job using Gen AI will be those that succeed and continue their career going forward. So I think that blending is happening very, very fast. So I think everyone in the room is a tech professional in 5 years' time.
Yes, Sujit, we used to have Ramcharan come and be one of our advisors. And in one of the HR meetings that he had with us, he said that if you as HR don't know how to code or don't know how to hire a coder, you're out of your job. So you better learn tech to hire people who know tech, or you learn tech on your own. Otherwise, there's no middle management job that are going to exist. This he told us in 2018.
So last question, you're applying for a job in a company. Would you prefer the first interaction to be with an AI tool or with a human co-pilot with an AI tool?
So if that question is directed to me as a person, and I would answer it both as an interviewer and as an interviewee, if you're asking me, I would definitely prefer an AI co-pilot. I wouldn't, God forbid, I wouldn't go for an interview which is 100% AI, and I wouldn't like to be an interviewer where I have to select 100% on AI part. Yet we are and this is again a disclaimer. We are talking about 2023. 5 years later, maybe you ask me, my answer might be different. But today, my answer is no. With a co-pilot, thank you, that's better.
Gargy, what would you prefer? An AI tool, a human assisted with an AI tool?
Today, I definitely use an AI tool to shortlist. So it's my first step. Like he rightly mentioned, right now, there is a lot of control measure that is still required. A lot of ethical practices that needs to be in place where you still need humans to interact and figure out. So I get a lot of CVs, which is on predictive, reports that is there, and you end up hiring a particular gender or you end up hiring a particular type of employee, but it depends. So for shortlisting, yes, for now, and co-pilot, when it comes to finalizing it. We still want the human touch in that.
Gavin, your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, to be perfectly honest, I joined my first firm because I liked the people I met in interviews. I joined EY because I liked people I met in interviews. So whatever magic goes on behind the scene that screens my CV till I'm facing somebody, the reality is the interview is a two-way thing, right? It's for high quality individuals, it's much about, will you fit in our culture, and are you the right fit for us? Do you like us? Do we like you? As the technical skills, which, to be honest, have been screened to death by the time you're probably sitting in front of somebody. I've rarely seen a really good technical interview that's ever been done. So for me, it's the people.
I can, relate another anecdote, if you allow me 30 seconds. I know this is a technical forum and there's a lot of focus on technical part, but like you rightly said, we are missing, in this discussion, obviously, because we are focused on technology, we are missing the organizational fit part, which is, especially as you grow, into the senior role, it becomes very important, the whole person as we talk about it. And I remember again in one of my previous organizations, once I was formally sort of selected, etc., and went through it, I was asked to join for an evening social on a desert safari. I didn't know that was part of the recruitment process. And this was a part of the whole assessment process. So the whole essence of that was an assessment process which would sort of assess the whole person. And then later when I was being briefed, the concern was that if you could be a great technical person, but if you're not a good fit within the team, they don't want you. So, just to put things into perspective.
You are lucky.
Yeah, so if you are an interviewer, and you're hiring people, and as HR people, I'm sure we all use structured interviews, and ask the same questions to everybody, because that would standardize your responses and you can make selection. I think AI would be able to do a better job of asking standardized questions. But the question is, can AI capture the emotion and the body language of the candidate? If it can, wonderful. If not, I think that's going to be a big limitation. But I think at the end, one of the biggest questions for me in using technology for selection is, what about employer branding? How do you communicate that? Because when a candidate comes to a company for interview, you are the face of the company, you are the brand, as a selector. So would you put a machine in front of the person, or would you want to put a human face? I think that's a big question for me to ask. What do you want to do? Is it efficiency that matters, or it's a human interaction and creating that impression that's more important?
It's an interesting one if you want to get scared about AI, to your point of, will it capture the emotion? So we have labs, we work a lot with Microsoft, and we were looking at the boardroom of the future, which has cameras and mics, and it's linked to Microsoft Surface, and it listens to what's being discussed, and it assesses your facial features and your voice to do sentiment analysis associated with it. And so it does all of the usual voice to text, so it captures all the meeting minutes. If people go, yeah, no, I'll do that, when will you have it done? Next Tuesday. It puts it in people's calendars as reminders, which is remarkable. So it's like the Microsoft Copilot on steroids. But then what's quite interesting is it says, and Gavin won't do it, because the terminology he used, or the facial expression, or his voice, if I look at it statistically, because I'm looking at his email, I look at his calendar, I can track what he's doing using AI. With an 85% probability, Gavin saying he will do it on Tuesday won't happen. And so it can already predict where I'm going to fail while I'm sitting making my comment on what I'm going to do. So it's remarkable where the AI will get to. But again, I go back to the person at the other side. It's a two-way thing, I think, on an interview.
So quick thing, the last one is, Gavin showed an image, the last one, right? The skills 2.0, where skills intelligence is at the heart and all the HR systems. So do you think the skills intelligence is going to be the Intel chip of the HR ecosystem going further?
I'll pass it over because I already sold that message, so I won't contradict myself.
This is for others. Yeah, you can answer. Any one of you can answer.
Is it blending? Look, I would say yes to it for two reasons. One is I'm very passionate about it personally. And second thing, I think if, again, we come back to the same thing, if HR has to lead the transformation, and we have seen from everybody else, technology skills and things like coding skills within the HR team are becoming the precursor for HR to be a driver. Now, if that has to happen, and that is the actual eventuality, whether we like it or not, I think that the diagram that we saw from Gavin, I think everybody should be queuing up to ask him for that copy of that.
Perfect.
See, obviously, this is quite obvious that we need to be knowing the tech, using the tech, be around tech people, and everything around that. We also moved from healthcare, where our doctors and nurses were used to having patients walking into facilities, to we walking into their laptops, phones, apps, where we are providing virtual consult. So things have moved. The mode of communication has changed, the way we interact has changed. Everything has to go in that direction. Having said all of this skill set, there's something core that many studies, including yours here, as well as other partners that I've done, they talk about 4 to 5 future skills that we need to have, and adaptability of it is one. Whether we adapt to tech or we vanish from this surface of the earth, that's one. The other thing is we have to collaborate with iMocha and people like you to collaborate for the next future, the tomorrow. And the key point that Imran was mentioning is also communicating, right? How do you communicate, and in a sector like ours, with empathy? Now, these are your core human-centric skills that is still required. Your tech, AI, everything will come, but the base of this is this. And if you do not continue to have that, embed it into your leadership skills, will not be there. Your skill intelligence will definitely is important, and what you learn today will not be there tomorrow. You'll learn another thing, but if you don't have the core skill of adapting it to it, you'll never be there. So that's my take on it.
Thank you to all of you. I guess it was a great panel discussion, and all of you got to learn few things around this. Any questions anyone has to the panel?
Ladies and gentlemen, the forum is open for question and answers. Delegates in the audience are requested to ask questions.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It was a wonderful panel discussion. I think this question was popping me when the entire discussion was going on, and we all said that it is quite important and it is evident the skill-first transformation will be happening. But all of us are in this region for quite a long time, and I could see a veteran sitting on this table. And today, all the organizations which operate still in a traditional manner, when you see the number of employees in every division or every department changes, from finance to IT, and it comes to HR to learning and development, it shrinks, right? From 20, 30, it comes down to 5, 10, and it comes to shorten down further to with HR and L&D. Sometimes it starts and ends with one person. In such a case, in the next few years of time, how do you think that this whole concept of skill transformation will be able to enabled and established in organizations with such a lean structure in place? Also, traditionally practicing and repeating the same steps year after year, there is hardly any opportunity for HR and lean professionals in most of the organizations to upskill themselves. How is that whole change is going to happen? Do you have any other suggestion to the organization? Probably, Mr. Ramakrishna, you are into consulting business and you've been meeting quite a lot of people, I guess, and same goes with Gavin, I believe. So how do you think that this is going to happen?
I've got that one first, have I? Nice, thanks. Appreciate that.
Didn't let anybody to pass on the other side.
Here to my hand quickly. Look, it's not a simple one, and again, I think the challenge for the region, and that's, I grew up out here, I've been working here for the last 15 years again, so I've spent a lot of time here, is that creating the case for change has failed really in terms of being very, very clear. So the investment into real transformation hasn't really happened. So that being said, I do think looking forward, there are a couple of things. Practically speaking, as organizations start to adopt technology, that's going to force a transformational change. So if I think about a HR unit today that does that first mover advantage type of an idea, where you're starting to look at skills in a very different way, where you can attract professionals in a very different way because the compensation scheme is quite different, I think that'll create enough noise to start moving some. I think the second thing is, we didn't really focus on nationalization as part of any the conversation, but whether it's Saudiization or Emiratization, the ability to attract and retain locals and develop them through to becoming sustainable leaders, whether it's in Saudi or in here, is something that does require people to feel engaged and feel like they're learning. And I think that's something where, if I think about in Saudi, today, PIF or Aramco can offer salaries that most others can't compete with. So if you do want to retain those top talent, it is about a purpose, back to the point that was said before. So frequently we'll have people that are leaving to join a ministry to drive transformation, to be part of a Vision 2030 or create new skills. So I think it's around that value proposition for people that get it right will create more of a pull as well to justify that transformation. So that's my first kind of view of going, you need to create a case for change. I think practically speaking, if you go back to industrial revolutions, jobs always go up, they don't go down. And so the nature of the job changes and there's a lag, but inevitably every industrial revolution has seen more jobs in the workplace. So I think it's also about, as those organizations shrink, is what's the new roles that are being created and how do you retrain people for those and give them that career, particularly for probably people, maybe not, some of the people maybe not on the stage, but for the newer or people coming into the organization to say, what does that look like going forward and how do you transform your career quickly? I think HR doing it to themselves, that was a common theme throughout the HR professionals sitting here going, physician, heal thyself, right? So if you're going to do it, start with yourselves. And I think to the point of, how many hours of training, and going, why would you talk about hours of training? That's an irrelevant. I mean, that really is a control-driven organization rather than a value-creating organization. Those kind of concepts of saying, what would HR of the future look and feel? How would they feel different? Let's take one area. Let's make sure the organization feels the difference with HR having transformed to create the case then for other parts of HR having that further investment in them. Ultimately, return on investment. I mean, that is, if you think about the region here, it's either owners that the family groups who care about return on investment. It's the government who cares about a return on investment, or it's the global organizations who don't want MENA to continue to be that really expensive location that they have to fund in order to do global business in the region. So return on investment. So that to me is how you fix it. Anyway, I'll pass the mic. Thanks for it though.
A couple of points, I think very interesting, but a slight different perspective. I work in the area of skill, in the area of talent, as well as technology. Now, to me, skills first does not really work well if we are talking about jobs. I think the whole concept of job itself has to change. Unless and until, I think Kunal touched upon tasks. So I think it's not just about skill mapping. What is becoming more important for all of us is task mapping. There was an example Gavin gave of a bank teller. If we actually look at a bank teller's job, almost 70% of the tasks can be automated using an RPA only. So on one side, what is important is to relook at the whole concept of job and work to make skills happen. Another important point that came up is around skill taxonomy. I think we have to adapt a common language, which is not there. Attempts are being made. In World Economic Forum, you will find a global standard has been put up for what is going to be the taxonomy. The third point which also came up is we are looking at skills today at a very superficial level. The skills today can be looked with the help of technology in a very different way. For example, we can look at skills, we can look at co-occurring skills, adjacent skills, underlying skills. We can also get data points around whether a skill is stable, is it growing, is it declining. So the whole concept of getting a skill visibility becomes very, very critical, and that's the first thing which the skills intelligence platform should provide. If we get these things right, then the usage of the skills will completely change the manner in which we approach any HR process. Now, for example, every day we see LinkedIn, go to a LinkedIn, copy the job description, put it into a chat GPT, generate a CV, which is a 100% match. Does CV remain valid for a screening? You will have no option but to move to skill assessment first. So again, a question around, is it this my choice or is it that my choice? I think we have to provide a menu of choices. So I think we need to fundamentally relook at the whole concept. This is going to change the concept of an operating model that we talk about, because the businesses are changing, we will have to adapt. And shelf life of skill is changing in 18 months or so. So lifelong learner, all the concepts which the panel has talked becomes relevant, but I think the first shift that we need to bring in HR is to start to relook in a very different way, and technology is a big enabler. We should use it for heavy lifting. Thank you.
Thank you for the discussion you just had. Really benefit from it and I enjoyed it. My question is a little bit of a chicken and egg question, in the sense that we keep talking about transformation and HR's role in that transformation. So having worked in Europe, APAC, and now in Middle East, what I keep hearing and everywhere where I've been working is the leaders are saying, well, HR is not capable to run a transformation. They don't have the skills and capabilities, whether it's a skills transformation you're talking about here, or whether it's a general thing. HR on the other side keeps saying, well, the business leaders or the C-suite doesn't understand the people and organizational aspect, and they keep saying no to whatever we suggest. What I've seen in my own career and what I've seen in more successful companies when it comes to HR is that a lot of the HR leaders are able to convince and understand the business and really set a business case and precedents that makes the leadership listen to them and let them do a skills transformation as you described here, or be heavily involved in digital transformation as well. When it comes to this region, if we start looking inwards, what's your opinion on, is it really the leaders in the companies who are right about, well, maybe HR professionals don't have the skills and the experience to go through these transformations and have the impact we wish them to have? Or is it really the leaders who's the blocker and just don't understand how to involve the people or HR organization? Thank you. So
My take on that, I would say that things are changing around the world. There was a time, and I'm very young to all your people, so you can comment on that. There was a time when the CEOs would meet the CHRO once in a quarter, once in a month. The CEO usually meets the VP of sales every day or every week. That's the most important function for the CEO, right? Making sure the numbers are ticking. And that's why the sales head meeting happens every week. And CHRO was once in a quarter. I guess that has changed. CEOs are meeting the CHROs very often. I'm saying that frequency would have come down to a month or weeks, right? Like what we saw, Mr. Wadhwani explaining the transformation at the Chaitram's group, right? He was the forefront of the transformation on how a family-run business getting a CEO, an external CEO to run the organization. So the HR is transforming the organization. So a CEO is meeting CHROs more often. This shows that the CHROs are having more say in the organization decision making, building the organization, not only the culture, but building the organization for the future. And because the CHRO is getting involved, you will see maybe the CEO who was listening to the inputs of a chief learning officer once in a quarter is now listening to the input once in a month. And same it with talent acquisition. So I'm seeing, at least when I'm talking to different CHRO leaders around the world, CHROs or the HR leaders are getting more say in the boardrooms today. And this transformation you'll see in the last 3 years happening more frequently, 3 to 5 years, than it was 10 years ago.
Yeah, I do agree. And for family-owned organizations, Gavin also mentioned, it's slightly different. You have to behave like one of them. Then only they'll start believing that you are there. There's mutual mistrust overall. If you see anywhere, employees don't trust their organization don't trust their employees, and it's pretty much equal percentage of that. So the moment we start, this is my third family-owned organization, so I've worked with the biggies in India as well as here. So I would say that it's very important. Kunal will resonate with me also on that if you're running a family-owned organization, if you start behaving like that, their interest is your interest, and demonstrate that, it's quite important. If my organization is very achievement focused, very productivity focused, and not very people focused, and I'm trying to implement a program which is people focused, it will not digest well. You have to pick what is your current culture of the organization, do a culture survey maybe, figure out, yes, we are an organization that is achievement focused, we are an organization which is customer focused, and then people focused. Then whatever you present as a HR will be well accepted. You can make bite size for them to digest first until you reach the last destination. And this is very simple, that you say that align with the organization's vision, and the culture should be there to sustain the initiative. Otherwise, you'll be having initiative after initiative with no destination at all.
And just on a lighter side, I heard from someone in this group today that the salaries for the HR people in the region are increasing. I don't know that is true or not, but just a couple.
So we're going to take one more question. I'm sorry, because we're running short of time. So any more questions, you can have it directly one-to-one during the networking dinner. Right now, this is the last question.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Thank you, first of all, to the organizers for hosting this session. Very informative, very impressed with the speakers, and the amount of knowledge sharing that has happened here is amazing. So I have two questions, and before the questions, I want to add one point. Change is the law of life, and if you don't change, you've got good examples, you become obsolete. So my question to the panel is, how is the sales first transformation reshaping the traditional learning and development approaches? And how can L&D be drivers or ambassadors of change in promoting and supporting the skills first transformation?
So maybe I'll take a shot at it. Please. So I'll tell you a process framework which I heard from somebody. The person name, I'll quote his name as well, is Sunil Mamtani, a senior director at Capgemini in New York. So he had discussed this with me almost 3 years ago, and finally when we implemented it, when anybody applies to your organization, they'll apply through a resume, through a CV, right? That is a standard process. How can you create, he said, at that time where generative AI was not very prevalent, a skill profile of an individual the moment the person applies without any human intervention, match that skill profile with the organization's skill profile for that job. And if there are gaps, if everybody creates great resumes, the person may be saying true in his resume, lying, let's keep that aside. But if you compare it with that organizational skills benchmarking for that job, and if you get, oh, there is no skill gap, great, you say that person, respond to him, you have a 90% skill matching with your job, great profile, we are scheduling your interview directly. Another case, your matching is only 40%. We need a minimum 60% match to proceed you ahead. There are two skills where the matching is less. These are the two learning videos. YouTube is the biggest learning platform in the world. You curate from there, send it to him or her. Hey, have a look at these two videos. You're lacking in this skill. And can you reapply by learning those concepts in next 2 to 4 weeks, and we'll be happy to proceed you further. So you're embedding learning even in the system even before the employee has joined. And now imagine a person is joining at the joining, you get to know what is the skill profile of a person. So when a talent acquisition team gives that profile to the internal onboarding team, they're telling, hey, this is the skill readiness of that person. We know the person is only 40% match. We have hired a person who is not a full-baked potato, but there are gaps. Can you focus on this learning so that the person is job ready in next 4 weeks? But we didn't have any options, so we went ahead with this. So rather than just saying, I've hired a person, you're using a language where the learning is embedded from before the person becomes an employee. In the process, when a talent acquisition team is transforming the data to the talent learning and development, and throughout the life cycle of the employee, imagine this process happening in a much of a pull process than a push, right? If you are able to articulate this, implement this, you will see a different adoption of overall learning and things with the people. And a best example I always say is, I always wanted to have a health app to track my sleep, my food habits, my walking and everything. And every health app would tell me, insert how many hours did you sleep? Insert what did you eat? How many steps you walk? Then only will give you analytics, very difficult. But then you have smartwatches. You wear an Apple Watch, it walks the number of steps, it tells you the oxygen level, your heartbeats, everything. And then the analytics works. So if the things are happening, and then you once in a day see the app to see all the analytics. So it's a pull data, it's not push. If anything is in a pull, the adoption is much better rather than a push. So can you have this learning in a pull mechanism embedded at different elements where the employee feels, oh, nobody's telling, if a L&D manager tells me, go and do this course, it's push. But if I get to know, you're in this job, these skills are getting redundant. Your job role is changing. You need to learn the skills in next 2 years. Else, your role will get redundant in the organization. So we recommend you to upskill to these skills. These are assigned to you. It's your call. There will be a change. I hope I answered it.
Okay, I think if I understood your question, it is about how can L&D drive the skills first transformation. Okay, my view is that typically L&D role is seen to be, designing, developing, and running, delivering programs. That's just a task. That's what they have to do. But for me, the real role of L&D is to shape the organization's culture, learning culture, and also how do you create a learning organization where the organization is learning in a collaborative way. There's a psychological safety factor that you can do things and fail and learn from it. And I think that's where L&D need to enroll the leadership into this whole journey. You can't do it as an L&D, as a chief learning officer. You got to get the leadership onto your side in this vision of creating a learning culture and learning organization. For me, I think that's the role. And if you work in different directions around that vision, I'm sure all these initiatives will fall into place.
Thank you so much. That was a wonderful session. Thanking the moderator and the panelists. I request you all to stay back on the stage. I would like to invite Mr. Satish Kumar, the founder and CEO at Idea Labs, to hand over the token of appreciation. Token of appreciation to Dr. Ramakrishna Movva. A round of applause, ladies and gentlemen. And next to Ms. Gargy Mohanty. Requesting Mr. Satish to stay back. Now I would like to invite Mr. Anshul Nagar, the head of sales Middle East from iMocha, to hand over the token of appreciation to Mr. Gavin Maxwell. A round of applause, ladies and gentlemen. And to Mr. Imran Ahmad. I request Mr. Ashish Gakre, the founder of HR Shapers, to please join all of our dignitaries on the stage.